Hello, I'm Anna. Today I'll tell you my shocking life story. I'm 45. 10 years ago, I experienced an incredibly traumatic experience. When it happened, I was married and have a 5-year-old son. So, it was March 15th, 2014. I was returning home from a corporate party in the evening. I called a taxi. The taxi didn't arrive for a long time, but finally showed up 20 minutes later when I was about to cancel the taxi and call a new one. When the car drove up and I got inside, I smelled a slight fumes. To be honest, it immediately confused me. But then I thought that maybe the previous client in this car was drunk and left this smell behind, because it's unlikely that a taxi driver would dare to drive drunk, I thought. The taxi driver looked like an ordinary 50-year-old man, not very friendly, with unkempt hands and long hair tied in a bun. After 5 minutes of driving, he suddenly turned from a silent, unfriendly person into a talkative, merry fellow, told about his adventures as a taxi driver and that he works as a taxi driver for fun, and he does not need money. He has a lot of it. After which he said something that seemed strange to me. He said, "Besides fun, I chose this job to drive such beautiful red-haired girls like you, madam. God, how I love red hair. It looks so beautiful when I take it and wind it around my fist." He said these words with such pleasure and enjoyment that my hair stood on end from shock. I realized that the person is very strange. After this, I took out my phone and wrote to my husband, "I'm in a taxi with some kind of perversion. Taxi number, calling the police." But this creature saw out of the corner of his eye that I was nervously writing to someone, and he realized that I was asking for help and simply snatched the phone from my hands. I am in complete shock, but still not showing that I am in a terrible panic. I tell him, "Please, let me go. I will not tell anyone about what happened. Just put me down." He did not even turn his head in my direction when I begged him for mercy and silently turned into the forest. We drove through the forest for about 20 minutes, but in these 20 minutes I managed to rethink my whole life. I remembered my son, how tightly I would hug him if I could get out of this car and get home. I also thought about my husband, how we first met, and how we loved to watch TV series at night after we sent the child to bed. I began to appreciate all these moments much more when I understood deep down that this was most likely my last day of life. And then he suddenly braked sharply in the middle of the forest and said to me, "Now you will take my big stick in your mouth," and without thinking twice, he took it out. I, without thinking twice, began to fulfill his request because I understood that I had no other choice. In the process, he wound my hair around his fist and began to shout, "Oh yeah, take it all," and holding my hair, he controlled my head up, down. Up, down. After that he said, "You will be my red-haired obedient girl. I hope you have red hair everywhere, not just on your head." He decided to check this, and when he was convinced that this was not the case, he gave me a strong slap in the face, after which he shouted, "I love red-haired girls." Angry, he started the car, and we drove somewhere. On the way I said, "Since I did everything you asked, could you let me go now? I promise no one will know about this." He began to laugh and said, "Of course no one will know. Because you can't trust me, you can't go home. The red monkey will live in my cage." Tears appeared in my eyes. I was absolutely sure that I was finished. We stopped again in the middle of the forest. I got out of the car and I thought, well, that's it, he'll finish me off here and bury my body here. I had already resigned myself to my death. Hope had left me. Suddenly this freak started looking for something in the ground and found a door. It was a basement in the ground. In the middle of the forest, I was completely shocked by what I saw. He took me to this basement and locked me there, after which he said, "If you behave well, red monkey, I will surprise you more often. I will bring you gifts." And then he left. I began to examine the basement. It was just a hole in the ground. In the middle of the hole lay a yellow dirty plate. It looked like someone had already eaten from it, and an old mattress. I realized that someone had lived here before me. I also found a couple of red hairs. This psycho really had a great attraction to red-haired girls. There was also a blue women's t-shirt. At that moment, I already understood that I would live here for some time. I don't know exactly how long I would be here, probably until he got tired of me and wanted to get rid of me. I tried to break down the door for a couple of hours, and exhausted from futile attempts, I just fell and fell asleep. I woke up, and by the light from the ravine in the door, I realized that it was now somewhere around 4 to 5 in the morning, sunrise time. A few hours later, I heard a car arrive. I realized that a taxi driver had arrived, but not to take me home, but for fun. He opened the door and entered my basement. He was already without pants. He was only wearing a t-shirt. Then he said the following, "Were you waiting for me, monkey?" Then I saw that he had something in his hand. It was red hair dye. He dyed me red there. You know what I mean? After which he started hitting me in the face with his stick, then sex. It was all very dirty and got to the point. I don't want to go into details. I'm still scared to remember. When it was all over, he left me 3 burgers and a bottle of water that he had bought earlier. He was about to leave, and at the end he said, "Remember I promised that I would make surprises if you were good? So, expect a surprise tomorrow." After which he started the car and drove away. I didn't care anymore. I was mentally broken. I was cold. I was terribly hungry. I pounced like a hungry wolf on the burgers he gave me. I think I ate them in 1 minute and washed them down with water. When I wasn't hungry anymore, I lay down and tried to fall asleep, but it was cold and damp there. There was no blanket. There was nothing to warm up with. Then I started screaming, "Help! Someone!" in the hope that someone would hear me in this dense forest and save me. I screamed like that for about an hour, but to no avail, after which I lay down and fell asleep. The next day he came again. This time he came and dressed, and in his hands he was holding a foxtail, apparently bought in a sex shop. I immediately understood where he was going to stick it in me. He said, "And here's my surprise. Today you can be my sweet red fox." I was there, but as always there was no choice. He shoved a foxtail into me, you know where. And then sex began. This time he pulled my hair so hard that he tore off several clumps. Pleased with himself and me, he left me 1 sandwich and a bottle of water, after which he left. With a frantic feeling of hunger, I think I swallowed this sandwich whole. I also seemed to have caught a cold. Since it was damp and cold there, I was very cold all night. By evening I felt that my temperature began to rise, but I understood that no one would help me in that basement in the forest, and most likely my death was already near. Exhausted and sick, I went to bed, hoping that I would die that night. When suddenly in the morning, at 5 to 6 o'clock, I heard that someone was walking very close. At first I was not happy because I thought that this crazy taxi driver had arrived again. But why so early, I thought. But suddenly I heard unfamiliar voices. It was some grandfather with a little boy. You can't imagine how happy I was at that moment. I'm saved, I realized. And I started screaming, "I'm here, help me." They heard me. I realized that they were shocked. When they found the door to the basement, they started knocking down the door and freed me. It was a grandfather who came with his grandson to look for mushrooms, but found something he didn't expect to find at all. They took me straight to the police, where I told them everything, and that bastard was immediately caught and sent to prison for life. My family said that they filed a police report the same day I went missing, and that those days of my absence turned into hell for them. I went through long rehabilitation with a psychiatrist. It helped me a lot, but some mental problems will stay with me forever. True, there are also advantages to this, of course significantly fewer than disadvantages, but still I have learned to value every day of my life more, to enjoy spending time with my family more, and to love every day of life with all the successes and failures. Thank you for listening to my story. Please support me with a like. Bye, everyone.